Lately, have you found yourself completely trapped in bed for hours at a time, frozen beneath the suffocating, immovable weight of your own sheets, aimlessly scrolling through a glowing screen while your life silently piles up in the shadows around you? It is an agonizing, deeply paralyzing paradox that millions experience but few talk about. Professional deadlines are stacking higher, household chores are being utterly neglected, bills are going unpaid, and unread messages are accumulating by the dozen. Yet a heavy, leaden exhaustion has taken complete, uncompromising control of your physical limbs. It makes it feel as though the very last drop of your biological vitality was siphoned away long ago by an invisible force, leaving your muscles feeling like concrete and your mind clouded by a dense, unyielding fog. It is in these exact moments of total, agonizing immobilization, when the simple act of rolling over or sitting up feels like an insurmountable mountain to climb, that you inevitably slap yourself with that deeply toxic, all too familiar internal label, "I'm just being lazy." Perhaps managers, teachers, childhood peers, or even well-meaning family members have repeated that dismissive, critical word so many times throughout your formative years that you have finally fully internalized it, transforming a cruel, superficial external assumption into what you now believe is an absolute, unchangeable truth about your core character, yet deep down, beneath layers of shame and defeat, a quiet, desperate voice still remembers that you never actively wanted to live like this, leaving you entirely confused and unable to comprehend why the simplest everyday responsibilities, like brushing your teeth, answering a basic email, cooking a nourishing meal, or washing a single dish, now feel like trying to sprint through waist-deep, freezing quicksand while dragging an anchor behind you. The terrifying reality that most people fail to realize is that true. Chronic laziness and severe systemic burnout look virtually identical to an outside observer, as both behaviors manifest as extreme slowing down, task avoidance, profound social withdrawal, and operating on an entirely empty tank. At their absolute core, however, they are completely opposite psychological and physiological states. While a lazy person actively enjoys their downtime, feels perfectly content doing absolutely nothing, experiences a sense of relaxation, and suffers no internal moral conflict about their lack of productivity. A burned-out individual is trapped in a state of profound emotional, physical, and neurological exhaustion triggered by carrying an unsustainable volume of chronic, unmediated stress for far too long. Modern empirical data indicates that nearly 3 out of 4 adults have faced symptoms directly tied to this systemic collapse, with over 40% landing in the critical, severe territory where basic cognitive, executive, and physical functioning begins to completely fracture and break down. When your system reaches this dangerous, overloaded breaking point, your mind automatically triggers an evolutionary defense mechanism known as depersonalization. This process structurally detaches you from your immediate reality as an emergency survival tactic, making you feel like a ghost observing your own life like a distant movie where you play the protagonist, yet possess absolutely zero control over the plot or the script. You didn't suddenly transform into a broken, unmotivated, or useless person overnight. Your emotional circuitry has simply tripped its own internal circuit breaker to shield your brain from a total, catastrophic psychological overload, mapping the systemic collapse. This internal shutdown spreads relentlessly and indiscriminately into every single corner of your existence, systematically swallowing your personal interests, your creative hobbies, and your baseline patience until your entire personality feels fundamentally altered to those who know you best. Behavioral science defines this profound, terrifying loss of interest as anhedonia, a clinical state where the dopamine reward pathways in your brain have been so thoroughly worn down by overwork, sleep deprivation, and constant cortisol exposure that activities that once sparked genuine excitement and joy, like painting, exercising, playing music, or even your favorite video games, now feel like just another exhausting obligation on a never-ending to-do list. Simultaneously, your baseline calmness and emotional resilience vanish completely, replaced by an agonizing, hypervigilant irritability where a simple phone notification chime, a slow-loading web page, or the sound of someone speaking slightly too loudly nearby causes you to instantly snap, panic, or feel deeply, internally unsettled. This occurs because chronic, unceasing stress forces the amygdala, the brain's ancient threat detection hub, to get stuck in a permanent, locked state of high alert, while the prefrontal cortex loses its structural capacity and blood flow required to regulate your rational thoughts and complex emotions. Your nervous system is quite literally drowning in sensory data, causing your survival brain to falsely flag even the minor, normal frictions of daily life as an immediate, existential threat to your well-being. When this survival mode permanently locks into place, your brain begins rationing its remaining fuel by ruthlessly cutting back on anything it deems non-essential to keeping you alive on a purely cellular level, leading directly to a state of severe self-neglect where your sleep cycle completely shatters. Your nutrition degrades into instant fast food survival runs, and basic hygiene routines begin to feel like monumental tasks requiring more energy than you possess. Despite this internal crumbling, high-achieving individuals will expend their absolute last drop of biological reserves maintaining a flawless public facade, a psychological phenomenon known as masking, smiling through professional meetings, over-delivering on projects, and telling everyone they are completely fine because they are terrified of being perceived as weak, lazy, or irresponsible. According to foundational research pioneered by Dr. Herbert Freudenberger, this structural erosion unfolds across 5 distinct, predictable phases. Stage 1, the honeymoon phase, marked by overachieving energy, intense ambition, and a full sense of invincibility, where you gladly take on extra work. Stage 2, the onset of stress, where fatigue, brain fog, and fractured sleep patterns first emerge but are actively pushed through and ignored. Stage 3, chronic stress, where baseline motivation plummets sharply, work quality slips, and chronic procrastination takes over as a coping mechanism. Stage 4, full burnout, where a deep sense of internal emptiness takes over, physical symptoms manifest, and responsibilities become terrifying. Stage 5, chronic burnout, where total physical and mental exhaustion becomes your permanent default state, mimicking deep clinical depression. If you are recognizing these warning signs within yourself, you must understand that this is not a personal failure, a lack of discipline, or a flaw in your core work ethic. We exist in a hyper-accelerated culture that systematically glorifies perpetual busyness, toxic hustle culture, and measures a human being's fundamental worth exclusively by their economic productivity and output. Yet, no one ever teaches us how to identify our own biological limits. And nobody ever shows us how to raise our hand and say, "I am completely exhausted," without carrying a crushing, agonizing weight of guilt. The protocol for reclaiming control. System overload. 1. Reframe mindset. 2. Brain dump. 3. Not to-do list. 4. Micro wins of system recovery. Recovering from a systemic neurological collapse requires a radical, uncompromising shift in strategy. Demanding that you immediately halt the endless marathon, you are forcing your depleted body to run and implement a practical, scientifically backed recovery protocol. The very first step is to banish the words lazy and failure from your internal vocabulary entirely, reframing your current situation with objective, analytical clarity. I have reached the temporary limit of what my biology can process. Encountering a functional boundary is useful data rather than a negative verdict on your character, serving as a vital biological alert system that tells you precisely where your threshold sits so you can adjust your baseline pace moving forward. Next, you must execute a comprehensive brain dump by turning off all digital devices, removing all sensory distractions, grabbing a physical notepad, and writing down absolutely every single task, worry, hidden dread, and deadline bouncing around inside your active memory. Physically exporting these thoughts from your nervous system onto paper instantly relieves the immense pressure on your amygdala, transitioning you from a state of being paralyzed by your problems to actively managing them on a tangible page. Once your thoughts are externalized, you must ruthlessly construct a strict not-to-do list by crossing out the 20% to 40% of tasks that are entirely trivial, non-urgent, or generate zero real-world value, effectively cutting your psychological burden completely in half with a single stroke of a pen. For the critical responsibilities that absolutely must be completed to keep your life moving forward, divide them into tiny micro-tasks that require less than 5 minutes to execute. Completing these small steps triggers immediate healing releases of dopamine, providing the precise neurological momentum needed to break your paralysis. At the same time, you must learn to transparently delegate or set firm boundaries for the massive projects that are simply too heavy to carry alone. You must standardize the strategic no in your professional and personal life, utilizing neutral, objective communication frameworks that protect your time without fracturing alliances, such as, I want to ensure this project succeeds, but my focus is currently completely locked onto my current deadlines. If I take this on, the quality of all our deliverables will inevitably decline. Finally, you must actively combat your brain's deep, evolutionary negativity bias by documenting 3 minor micro-wins at the conclusion of every single day, no matter how small they seem, while fiercely protecting a daily 15 to 30 minute decompression window entirely isolated from screens, notifications, and work demands. Reclaiming your life after severe burnout is never a perfectly linear journey, and it certainly will not happen overnight. But by giving yourself explicit permission to rest, heal, and rebuild one small micro-step at a time, you can permanently dismantle the energy trap and step back into your true power.